for next time, bit of an announcement that we're starting. Um, we're going to deal with land grabs on this broadcast, and I want to. We've dealt with them before in some ways. We're going to address fraud closures, predatory probate, contaminated land, and sheriff sales. There's all kinds of creative ways that they have to steal our land. Um, Here's my opening prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, please guide me as always so that my message is clear, rings true, and furthers your will for us on this earthly plane. Please encourage those who also love you to come share with us their experience, strength, and hope so we might all grow in wisdom and true understanding. I often wonder whether my efforts to spare people any of the suffering that the evil ones are inflicting on us is a worthy pursuit. Others may wonder that too. I hope I'm right in believing that you allow this suffering and this incredible evil in order to test us, to toughen us, to motivate us to seek more true wisdom that only comes from you, and to show us yet again that suffering, although it may be one of the best teachers, is the natural and probable consequence of our own sin, which draws into our lives and compounds the explosion of sin we now see more clearly from the evil ones. Please strengthen us so that we might be more effective parts of your plan. In the name of Jesus and in perpetual memorial of his enormous sacrifice for us. Amen. Um, okay. One of the first things I want to address is which can impact a lot of people as these private for-profit corporations are taking on more and more powers that just because they said so, and they're doing that for the purpose of grabbing our lands. This is, you know, in addition to grabbing our physical bodies, kidnapping our children, this is one of the more invasive things that they can do. Um, but it's also clearly contrary to the law of God as expressed in the Bible. And people may point out that the adversary we're dealing with uh, don't believe in God, or they certainly don't. Their behavior doesn't reflect that. Um, there is, however, a public law 97-280. It's almost offensive to even mention it. It was enacted in 1983. It was a little political deal, apparently, um, to placate Reagan's silent majority. That oh yes, these fake congressmen were willing to admit that the Bible had a formative influence on the nation. hmm how sweet. 1983 was proclaimed the year of God. He should be so honored, right? Uh, but that is Public Law 97-280. That can be read, and there are quotes from Andrew Jackson actually that indicate that God had more than just a formative influence on the nation, and that that was always that at the beginning that was acknowledged. Now I think that what was done, I don't want to get too much into a side trip on how the deception was carried out, but if you really look at the Declaration of Independence that acknowledges God, the creator of the universe, or the grand architect of the universe. Um, there's there's a reluctance to to really be clear which God they're talking about. So we thought we understood what our ancestors apparently thought they understood what they were signing. They weren't signing on to anything, but they were just going along with um, what sounded pretty good. And if y'all recall, that one of the big drivers of the American Revolution was the confiscatory property tax, and well, not just property tax, but I don't think even King George was that aggressive. Um, uh, Tax on various goods and services that England was sending over. So it was overtaxed, and then during the first few years post-revolution, taxation reared its ugly head again, and we had Shays' Rebellion, and the members of that rebellion were hanged. There have been tax revolts throughout our history, um, and they've not always been unsuccessful, but for the most part, they share one thing in common, and that is the assumption that the people who are doing this to us, stealing our lands, somehow have authority to do so. They're just misusing the authority. And if you're going to go on that assumption, you're not going to prevail very often. But that's what we've done in the past, and that's what we're continuing to do. And that's why I do this broadcast, because we're not doing that in our common law court under God in Ohio. So I encourage people to get on your computers and go to the website that we have for that, www.occr2021.com. All right, I don't want to just, you know, go on, but I can cite a lot of scriptural passages as well as their constitution that indicate that the property tax, which is the pretext that they're using to grab a lot of people's land, is unconstitutional according to their constitution, and it's certainly unbiblical. Just to throw this out there, Article 1, Section 10 of their 1787 Constitution, and this applies because they're always saying, well, we're going to steal your land unless you pay us X number of FRNs, Federal Reserve notes. So to do that, that's actually in violation of Article 1, Section 10, which says no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Well, if they're going on about property tax, they're claiming that we owe it to them somehow for some reason. And so if it's a debt, and why are they demanding that it be paid with a debt instrument, which is something other than the gold and silver coin that they're required to limit themselves to? So now I'm not unaware that the cabal didn't like this provision of their constitution, and so they enacted some legislation that appears to contradict it. It doesn't. You can't take the Constitution, their Constitution, according to their rules. You can't take that and change what it says and call it a statute and have that be good. It doesn't work that way. And that was pretty well established in their that first John Marshall decision that established how the Black Robed Wonders would be able to tell everybody, everybody in Congress how whether their statutes and codes were constitutional or not, and therefore valid or not. It was a big land grab between, or a big power grab between the black robe demons and the demons who occupy the halls of Congress. So um, I want to throw something else at you, and this kind of gets into the biblical area because everybody knows that all law is based on Bible law, is based on the law of God. And that's echoed in this decision from 1982 from their United States Supreme Court. Marriott, M-E-R-R-I-O-T, I'm sorry, Marion, Merrion versus Apache Indian Tribe, 1982 United States Supreme Court decision. Taxation is an inherent feature or power that can only originate from a sovereign. Well, who's a sovereign? Well, in England, they said King George was a sovereign, and some of their treaties even acknowledge that he still is, or whoever's occupying the Crown Corporation still is a sovereign. But they have a decision in which they admit, this is Chisholm versus Georgia, 1791. They admit that the people are the sovereigns, sovereigns without subjects. That was the whole freaking purpose of creating this new country, was this promise that the people would be their own bosses. Now, a lot of the people didn't really like that. They kind of liked to knuckle under and do what other people told them to do, and that's what we have today. Um, but they admitted it then, and now they may say, well, we've enacted other stuff since then, and now we don't think that the people are sovereign. Well, were you lying then or are you lying now? Um, I'm going to take what you confessed to back in 1791, or your ancestors confessed to, as the truth, and that was that the people were the sovereigns. Sovereigns don't pay tax; they don't pay tribute, and there's a whole line of a Bible verse that explains that. Taxation in ancient times could only be imposed on slaves, as Pharaoh did against the children of Israel when he took 1/5 of the proceeds of the lands that they tilled. Genesis 41:24. But God made it clear that it was not Pharaoh, but God who was the true sovereign over the land, and that free people would not pay Pharaoh, but would be expected to honor God by the offering of the first fruits from the land he gave them. Deuteronomy 26. This is also in accord with the Marion versus Apache Indian tribe case that I referred you to. They know. They know what the origin of their corporate code that they call law is. All right, I could go on with more Bible verse that makes it clear that whether you call it taxation or tribute, that it comes from, it's not to be imposed on sovereign people, and we've been admitted to be the sovereigns. So everything from there on that they try and inflict is just BS. Okay, I've done so much of the talking. Anybody want to add something, question something? Ask, how as a practical matter do we use this information? Anything like that?
Uh, I had a question later. I don't know, at some point we were going to go into a allodial title and how it worked. Um, I've had a question at that point. I also wanted to tribute
Allodial title
conquered.
is the type of title that the sovereign has. It's presumed that we all have allodial title. That's actually written into the Wisconsin state constitution, for example. Um, Now, to go to the trouble of proving that you have a allodial title uh, is going to be dependent on the quality of the record keeping that the cabal has engaged in over the decades since um, statehood, since whenever um, the U.S. corporate president uh, transferred lands to the state when each state entered the union. And when each state entered the union, and per the enabling acts, they agree. Every state agreed to be, or the people who were signing for, on behalf of the state, I should say. State can't do anything. They agreed that the people would have a republic, that they would guarantee to the people a republican form of government, which means government by consent. So any of this nonsense with, we're going to tax you whether you like it or not. The issue at the time of the revolution was taxation without representation. Just to skew things a little bit so that we wouldn't understand what the real deal is. The real deal is taxation without consent, not taxation without representation. When you have a republic, which every single one of the 50 states, when they entered, agreed that their people would have a republic. When you have a republic, you have the requirement of consent before anything can be done to you.
Catherine, I'd like to ask you this, and it's almost a rhetorical question. Uh, the question that everyone should be asking people in regard to property tax.
Mhm.
If
That's a
this is my property, how
mhm.
are you taxing it? Would you agree with
Right.
that?
Right.
That is a question everyone should be asking. How are you taxing my property? That right there suggests they have some type of ownership interest in it if you have to pay them something to live on your
Uh-huh.
property.
That's right.
Does that make sense? I think you would agree with me
Or
that
that
that's a cool.
that you entered into an agreement, a contract with them, that you paid for services of some kind. Um, yeah, but yeah, one of the basic concerns anytime you're attacked by the cabal or any other corporation is to understand who has the burden here. If I'm going to demand something from you, then I should have the burden to prove I'm entitled to it. Not I demand it because I you know I I can put a gun in your face and
Right.
yeah,
That's kind of the point I was making. Is there seems to be this long list of questions that people should be asking but are not. And you would
that's
think
right.
they would just ask these questions, like if you went to court or one of their what they presented falsely as a court to us, that's things that should be asked in that court session. Well,
Well, you
I'm
shouldn't be
confused.
going into their fake tribunals that they call courts, because
Well,
by doing that you are acknowledging in some way that you're required to do that, that you're required to go in there. And if you if, and you're specifically prohibited from doing that by the Bible. Do not partake of their evil. Do not go, and I don't have right at the tip of my tongue the exact language, but I don't think it's dens of iniquity, but it's something like that.
that's close. If that's
Yeah,
not it,
the
I
counsels of
always.
the ungodly. You don't go into the counsels of the ungodly. You certainly don't go in there and expect anything good to happen.
I never would, but I always thought too. that one way to manage that is to send them something in writing prior to a court date and saying, here's why I'm not coming into your court, and I'm hoping we can resolve this prior to this without even. And then you give them the bullet points of, okay, here's the problem I have with all this, and it doesn't really require me physically being there. And anything you sent me to summon any into your court didn't come to me anyway. It came to my corporate avatar, my straw man, or whatever. I would make it clear to them that you were aware of that, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I actually agree with you. If you can avoid, absolutely, if you can avoid going into their court, you absolutely should. Yeah, there's no,
Right.
unless you're pushing
There's
their
never an
gunpoint.
instance I would say that there's any purpose to be served in going into their so-called court. They don't have any authority, and once you start going in there, you've lost whatever blessings you had from the Almighty, and uh, you're opening yourself up for whatever they have to dish out. Um,
Well, and you're also surrounded by armed men who can pretty much do whatever they want with you once
yes, yes,
you're within those walls. They got you. You just stuck your foot in the
Yeah,
and
ground.
you've
you're
decided.
in their domain.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
That was the other thing I was going to bring up is the assumption that everyone goes under with property is the being recorded in some way or
There you
fashion.
go. hmm That's where they get their hooks into you. But they tell you over and over and over again, and they use their attorneys and their title agencies and their this and their that to tell you, oh, you can't transfer property unless you record the transfer. Big lie. That's just a big lie. Now, if you've already succumbed to that lie, you're not strapped with it for life. You can transfer the property to another entity, and that transaction you don't record. Then you let them know, look, you got this and this in your records. That information is false and outdated. The I have authority from the original owner. I have authority from the new owner to tell you that. If you have any questions, and they never do, you know, um, then they've accepted that there's no there's no service contract anymore. I mean, when you deal, this is a little different than when you deal with the electric company or the water company. They are providing some kind of a service. Now, it's a monopolistic kind of a thing. You don't really have a choice. Um, uh, but uh, when you don't pay, when you don't pay for the service, they cut off your service. You don't pay for the water, they cut off your water. Well, what happens when you don't pay? That's what they think that they've got going with the property recording. But it's a service. And if you don't pay for the service, they come to your property and they threaten you with guns and maybe kill you to get your property. That's not how it works in any other service contract.
Right. That's not how it works in any private transaction.
No.
If I don't take my car to a garage to have the oil changed, they're not going to come to my house with a gun and ask me, "What? Hey, your car's oil
Right.
change is due."
That's
we
right. That's right. We expected that you'd be a customer for life. Well, just because you expected that doesn't mean
maintain your
that's what
car.
we
We'll
agreed
kill you.
to.
In fact, they even extend the that service. Say you don't get your water bill paid, and they will tax that in some places, in a lot of places actually, that they will put that water bill on your taxes and then try to use that against you and your property.
Oh, really? I hadn't
Oh
heard
yeah,
that one.
I
oh
wasn't
yeah.
aware of that, Keith. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in our local county here in Ohio. At least in Montgomery County, that's what the way they do it. If you don't pay your water bill, they will put it on your taxes.
They won't just cut off your water.
Well, they will, but then you will they use it against you in a certain fashion where they'll they'll have you liable for you know
So the
not
Well, I
main
only
can just.
to
woman that's operating the county or whatever, the corporate
well, what they
county.
do is they penalize you, even very heavily when you get your water cut off. They can take extra steps against you and your property.
Oh, who knows what? I mean, one thing that I just popped into my head is if your water's cut off, then you
Yeah,
have some county agency knocking on your door where you don't have any water. How are you managing the sanitary aspects of your home or
exactly.
whatever? So yeah,
Right.
next thing you know, your door's getting knocked on by guess
Or
how
kicked
many
in.
people.
And you can see
So
how
Or
they
kicked
attach
in.
everything
That'll
to
be
that.
next.
You know.
I mean, I can't imagine there isn't somewhere in the country where that isn't. It's probably happening somewhere. Oh, hey, your water's cut off. You know, how you're flushing your toilets
Right.
or
Right.
washing your dishes or whatever. So
Well, then they just they stick their so-called public health agency on you.
that's what I was getting at with
Well,
that.
not
Yeah,
only that, your water is also connected with your sewer. And even if you have your water turned off, they're still going to charge you for the sewer. So you're going to get charged that fee on the water bill anyway, and that's going to go towards whatever the water bill was there in the first place. So they have all kinds of ways of doing this to us in one way or another.
In their system, they have, and they, as a practical matter, they're doing this for a lot, using a lot of pretexts. But they're also in violation of their Sherman and Clayton Antitrust Acts, and these are what you're describing are
Right.
specific instances of it's called tying, where you we'll do business with you, we'll sell you this that you want, but you have to take this that you don't want that we're selling also.
Yeah. And the
It's
problem
called
is
an
when,
illegal tie,
yeah,
and it's an anti-competitive practice in violation of Sherman and Clayton. In their world, of course, in their world, there is no such thing as the Sherman or Clayton Antitrust Act because they commit those acts all the time, those violations of their own corporate policy. That's why we can never have any dispute resolved by their buddies in their fake corporate tribunals. We can just never do that and expect anything.
well, on their end of things, their rules are fluid and subject to their interpretation. You
right.
know,
Uh-huh.
I,
Yeah,
I,
well,
I would
if you
I would
sign
never.
anything in their world, I mean, you sign anything in their world, and everything else is connected with all that as well.
Yes, yes, they assume that that signature
Right.
agrees to all kinds of stuff that you know the document that you signed did not pertain to. Like when you sign voter registration, as we know, when you sign a marriage license application, when you sign anything saying yes, I'll agree to pretend to be a U.S. corporate citizen slave. Uh,
Yeah, it
you
even
know,
works with the your car. They'll do the same thing.
oh yeah,
I mean, you
yeah,
sign all those papers that they want you to sign, and then you're bound by their terms.
yeah, right, right. But even in their world, there's a rule that when you sign, when you it's, a contract is not valid if there was not full and fair disclosure of all material facts beforehand. That's their Uniform Commercial Code. I don't claim rights from their statutes or codes, including that one. But if they admit stuff that's useful, we use it. it's an admission against interest. It's a confession that um, yeah. What were we on about? This applies kind of across the board. Anytime you're signing anything in their world, yeah, they can say that means you agreed to this, you agreed to
Right.
that, but it doesn't. You know,
But yeah,
it
there's
does.
plenty of
You're not
non.
necessarily bound by it. If you even if you use something as a reference, I'm guessing that's where you were going with that. For example, I know in some of the paperwork I've done, I've referred to United States Code for a penalty, not because I'm agreeing to anything that has to do with the United States Code. It's just a reference. Hey, here's what the corporation charges for this penalty. I guess I could charge it too, and that'd be fair. It'd be kind of like if you had a shop that does repairs. Well, the guy down the road charges this, so I guess I can charge it too. That doesn't make me bound to any contract to the guy down the road.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, I guess we can refer to their statute. Hey, these are your rules. You're bound to them. Doesn't necessarily mean I am, but you are. You
Yes,
can point that out to them.
but we can't let them. I mean, even if it's totally obvious, we can still never let them decide even whether 2 plus 2 is 4. If it's contrary to their corporate interest to say it's 5, that's what they'll do every time, no matter how ridiculous, as we've seen.
Oh yeah,
You know,
Of course, there's
nothing
much
too
we've seen
ridiculous
of
for
it.
them.
non-disclosures. There's plenty of them. So, you know, and if
Um,
it hasn't been pointed out to us, then we can also bring that up. I mean, especially if it's in there anywhere mentioned, and we can still use it. Their codes
oh
and
yeah,
using their rules.
yeah, we can use those against them, not to claim rights for ourselves. Um, yeah, paying property tax has always been an indicator of enslavement. Um, Nehemiah 5 verses 3 through 5. That's Nehemiah 5 verses 3 through 5. There were others who said, we are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses that we might get grain because of the famine. Also, there were those who said, we have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is like the flesh of our brothers, our children like their children. Ye behold, we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters are forced into bondage already, and we are helpless because our fields and vineyards belong to others. Well, okay, so they got themselves into a bad situation. But for those of us who have not um, already sold out, um, that's not the case. But we can make it the case by knuckling under and paying the king's tax. And y'all probably remember in Samuel 8, 1 Samuel chapter 8, um, God warned the people, you want a king uh, instead of to be ruled by me and the laws of the Almighty. You want a king, and he tells them this is the manner of kings, and in that always included taxation, conscription into the military, and on and on and on. Um, and he said, and then you will remember when it gets really bad, you will remember that I warned you, and you will cry out to me, and in that day I will not hear you. I assume that, I don't know. My guess is that if God may not want fair weather friends. Yeah, it's really great to have us. He wants us to worship Him. But if we're only worshiping Him when things are going our way, I think that's why we're being tested now, because things are not going our way. He's letting Satan have his way, and we'll see whether what Satan told God in Job actually comes to pass. And for many people, it will. If y'all remember in the first chapter, or maybe it's the second chapter of Job, Satan tells him, tells God, "Oh yes, Job is one of your best servants, and one of your best, and but then you've built like a protected area around him too. Everything he does turns to gold. Everything he's prosperous in whatever he does. Of course he worships you, but you start taking some of that away, and he will curse you to your face." And so that's what happened. God allowed Satan to test him, and I think that's what's happening now. So,
Catherine, I'd say that, if our Creator managed us as a lot like a penny parent would. I mean, if you think about it, if your children ever done something you warn them not to do and you just let them do it, hey, stay away from that bee's nest, you get stung. And boy, once they get stung, then the message kind of, oh, that's why Dad told me not to do that. Well, I'm
right.
almost thinking a lot of levels that's the way we were managed as well. Hey, I guess we have to fall into the whatever to learn the lesson, and I almost think that's kind of how I interpret it.
I believe that's true. Um, Psalm 24:1, "The earth is the Lord's and all it contains, the world and those who dwell in it." Um, but remember, God's plan originally was for us to be stewards of that earth, not to be slaves on the earth. Um, in Deuteronomy 26:1, "Then it shall be that you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance, and you possess it and live in it." Um, so now, if you go into their fake tribunals with the Word of God, there'll probably be no end to the punishment um, you'll receive, because um, you've abandoned the protection of God by going in there. Um, okay, so I don't know if anybody wants to spend any more time on the property tax, but there's all kinds of information out there. I found a website by a minister. He also wrote a book about doctrine of the lesser magistrate, which I think is that's that's erroneous. Um, but what he has to say about the property tax is right on, um, and it's I can get to the link, and it's got his name. He's from Wisconsin. Um, he's with the Mercy Seat Christian Church, and his name is Pastor Matt Truella. That's Trewhella. That's Trewhella. Matt Truella. He even gives a phone number, which I called, but nobody called me back. Mercy Seat Christian Church in Milwaukee, 262 623 6091. That's 262 623 6091. And then the website is mercyseat.net. That's mercyseat.net. The problem there's folks out there that are very much more knowledgeable about the Bible than I am, and yet they seem to be buying into uh, this nonsense about um, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, which Pastor Matt Trewella apparently created that. It's just another way of saying we're going to accept that Satan is in charge of our lives, and but we're going to try and undermine Satan by um, uh, I don't know, converting some of his underlings to the Word of God while they're still serving Satan, of course. Um, so there's a number of people in Ohio I've run into that way that think that makes sense. That we're just gonna undermine them through their. We're gonna vote them out. We're gonna get Christians um, into office. Okay. Um, Now there's I would also refer people to there's certain parts of this book by uh, got it right here Mel Stamper, who's a former uh, he was an attorney who resigned and a Christian. He's still buying into some of the nonsense, but he has a few choice um, uh, facts. Um, his his book is called Fruit from a Poisonous Tree. That's Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, Mel Stamper, and it's reproduced in PDF online. You can read the whole thing. On pages 188 to 190, he talks about the original presumption of allodial title based on the people's sovereignty, as I mentioned before, um, and it backs it up with their case law on that specific point.
Catherine, I have a question for
Uh
you.
huh.
You said allodial title is presumed, right?
Yes.
By
Yes.
whom? I'm certain. Maybe it's still.
Uh,
I don't know.
it,
Who
it,
is presuming it?
it's a presumed fact based on the people's sovereignty that was admitted. That was the whole basis of forming the country, was that the people would be sovereigns without subjects. And if you're sovereign, then your land is uh, the same type of um, full title that any other sovereign would have, not subject to anybody else's claim, unless you have,
Okay,
a contract or something that
right,
says
right. That'd
otherwise.
be. Well, I guess what I was wondering is if the like, let's say hypothetically, you exercise bad judgment and go into court, if you're saying the judge is acting under that presumption.
I would never say that anybody working for the cabal uses any of the presumptions that is in that are contained in their own so-called case law.
And I don't disagree with that. The thing, what I'm getting at is you go into court with anything relating to your property. I think
Well,
they want you to
you've already
believe that
lost. Just
you've
right
all
there, you've
right,
already lost.
right, you've lost, right, just by going to court, and I agree with that.
Yeah.
But they're treating it as though you are the owner of that property with full liability, even though they know on some level that the state has bound that property up in some kind of trust. Do you know what I'm?
Uh, just because they have created these theories of trust or any other theory that they use doesn't make it true.
Oh, I agree with that.
Right.
Isn't just the word property? Doesn't that put it in a taxable jurisdiction
I
instead of calling it
rather
land?
than using the term like private property or land,
Yes, yes.
land, yeah.
And is an allodial title the same as a land patent, or is it just the
Land
equivalent?
patent would be documentary evidence that uh, allodial title existed going back however far you run the title search.
They uncovered.
But the thing is, what happens is you're going to find in that search that there's going to be a break in the chain somewhere. The records are not going to all be there. There will have been a fire in the courthouse. There will have been a flood. There will have been something else that happened. There will have been a tax sale. Because remember, it's not just the owner that suffers from the illegal, unlawful taxation, but it's the purchaser at the sheriff's sale is not getting a clear title. So, and we have done, we were, in our Ohio Circuit Court of Record, if you go to the website, there is a case that we did. It was sort of done very quickly at the 11th hour after the sheriff's sale had already happened. That's when they decided to get serious. Um, and it's uh, Reese versus Seinenberg. If you go to the docket section of OCCR2021.com. And in that, you also named was the purchaser at the tax sale. And, you know, we awarded judgment against him as well. And as well as, you know, the attorneys involved, the so-called judges, everybody involved, aided and abetted everybody else. And so I suppose that, you know, they're just going to thumb their noses at that. I'm sure they are. But the point is, there's still a judgment out there that says that this guy that bought the property, supposedly at the sheriff's sale, is not the true owner. So, you know, what would have happened, you know, going into their fake tribunal? Probably the same thing or worse.
I don't understand how this stuff is still going on. Wasn't it proven like back in the 70s, like with the farmers' claims, a lot of this fraud? Like, I don't see how they're still getting away with it.
I'm sorry. Would you run that past me again? I have
Isn't the
kind of
farmers' claims sort of related to all this? When they took all those farms, like I think it was in the Dust Bowl era or something like that.
Mike, can I throw something in here? I wanted to say this when you asked that question. I think there was a case dating back to 1964 where somebody beat beat the bank in a foreclosure. Yeah, this goes way back. I mean, someone actually made the argument that, hey, the bank never actually loaned me any money. They just
Yeah,
extended to me my own credit. They
yeah.
brought nothing to the table and they're trying to walk away with everything. And I'm pretty sure the date on that case is in the 1960s, like 1964.
That's what I was
It's
gonna
like
say. Like,
before I was born. So yeah, you're right. This has been going on for a long time now. I mean, you would think everybody would know about this by now. So you've made a valid point. Yeah, this should be common knowledge.
yeah, I think it was
yeah.
called the farmers' claims. I believe it was called the farmers' claims. And like you said, I think it was probably around back then. I know it was like by the 70s or something. It was proven in court. And they were supposed to like pay back all the farmers and everything. It has a lot to do with the global currency reset that they've been talking about lately.
I'll
The
tell you what,
Nazar.
Mike. I think there's actually been several resets. I mean, this the great reset they're talking about now. There's been a lot of resets. I mean, the Great Depression, on one level was kind of a reset happening on a social level. That was, the Federal Reserve System causing an economic collapse just so they could affect social change. Uh, but at any rate, what my point being, I cannot believe that everybody right now isn't using some of this material to beat the banks in these foreclosure cases because my personal opinion, you ought to be able to, first of all, if the bank sends you paperwork regarding a foreclosure, you should respond to that saying, well, I'd like a forensic analysis of our loan by an outside party that has nothing to do with this case so that they can, first of all, you need to show me that you lost something. And I need some paper trail. And I don't, no bank will ever be able to produce that
Yeah,
because they never loaned any money.
I don't think they like paper trails too much,
I'd agree.
unless they're leading in circles and, and like a
Right.
maze.
I would love to see how a bank would respond to that now. Show me evidence that money left your accounts and you lost something in this transaction. Because the only way you can make a claim about anything is if you can demonstrate that you lost something.
They're not lending you any money. Um, if you go to Mel Stamper's book at page 145, he reprints the opinion in the credit. It's called the Credit River decision from Minnesota.
I have an hard time hearing you, Catherine.
Okay, is this better?
It is.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, yeah, this is the. If you go to page 145 of Mel Stamper's book, Fruit from a Poisonous Tree, they go in, the decision goes into detail about what the bank representative testified to and couldn't testify to. This was not a tax foreclosure, this was a mortgage foreclosure. And defendant appeared and answered that plaintiff had created the money and credit on his own books by bookkeeping entry as the legal failure of consideration for the mortgage deed and alleged that the sheriff's sale passed no title to plaintiff. So it's been done, and there are decisions in their system that admit to that. But this happened in yeah, you're pretty close on the date, Ron. 1968.
Okay. I thought it had to be around that. I think I've read that book, to be perfectly honest. That may be where I got it. I mean, I've consumed a lot of written material in my time, so yeah,
Right.
I just didn't remember where I had read that. So, but yeah, I know this is not something new. I mean, people have been making this argument in their courts for a long time, and it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of that would be now.
It's a
Some
slightly different theory than they go on when they do the tax foreclosure. So they uh, they have a different theory with every racket they run. Uh, but interestingly, Judge Mahoney died under mysterious circumstances a few months after issuing that decision.
well, that's a shocker.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with Brandon Williams?
Who?
Brandon Williams.
No,
He's got
who is
a
that?
website called onestupidfuck.com.
Oh, jeez, I'd have remembered that, Mike.
He's actually really interesting. He has a lot of stuff on there. One of his points is like income
Yeah, but he
tax.
probably wants people to go into their system, right?
Um, I'm not sure.
Everybody else I see does.
He's actually started his own law firm without, and he's not like an actual attorney. But he made a good point. He said, "How can you pay income tax when there's no money in the system? How can you profit when there's no money?" That is kind of a valid point, isn't it?
Well, and they try and impose income tax on um, people who are not federal employees in contravention of their own
Yeah, I
enabling
think it's the income
legislation.
tax uh, that they use.
If everything's a promissory note, there's not even any, like, how can you profit off of an IOU? I mean, they do it real well, it seems, but
Mike, I tell you what, I don't know if you've ever been introduced to this. I don't want to way off on a segue here, but I would want to. You did remind me of something. I've heard the mechanism that gives the paper money we use value is that in effect what it is, it's a commercial lien set against everybody's property. So when you get, when we trade that money, that paper dollar is actually a claim. It's a controlled document. It has numbers all over it. But the thing that it derives its value from is the fact that it's a claim against property. So I mean, these theories that it's a dead instrument or whatever. I don't think it's so much a dead instrument as it is a claim. The really screwy part about how our money works, I think, is that if we're not constantly borrowing money from the banks, it's as you said, there's no money. The money is always leaving. It is always, debt service is always pulling money out of circulation.
Yeah, they're
So,
always creating counting numbers.
isn't it our
right,
signature that like actually like breathes life into the document?
right, exactly. These are
Pretty
considered dead
much, right?
documents, and your signature is what actually makes it a living document. I've actually been introduced to that myself. I've taken a lot of this material over the years, and so
Yeah.
I am familiar
Me
with
too. I feel like I've went
so
backwards as far as
Every
my
time
business
you sign a
goes.
mortgage or a loan or a debt, a credit
your
card, I mean, it's
signature is
all
the
part of it.
source of the value. And there's a lot of it. Well, the thing is, your labor is horribly undervalued because if you think
It
about what
really is crazy when
everything,
you think about it.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
I
How
mean,
can
it's
that
really
be
half backwards.
a real lien though if you're if you're not if that's not fully disclosed to you?
Well, there's a thing, Catherine, and I'm going to say I absolutely 100% agree with that. There you're back into non-disclosure. You don't really how can you use money and not understand the nature of it?
Yeah, it's a big
That's
non-disclosure, isn't it?
that's right. That's the problem with the whole world is we are approaching a world that we don't understand how it even works. And
Yeah,
that falls into a
It's
lot of things.
huge.
Think about the average person knows and doesn't know. And this may sound a little arrogant, but what the average person doesn't know is a lot. you know,
Yes.
I don't know how most people function. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of people avoid learning these things because knowing these things is a burden. You know,
Well, yeah,
I,
it's
Well, we got to
designed for
know
a
them. I
system
mean,
that's
but we do
so
have to know
complex.
it.
yeah. I mean,
they built the system pretty good, I'll tell you, as far as like making it foolproof. Because by the time I figure this stuff out, I don't think I'm going to qualify as far as having a sound mind and body. By the time you get done going in and out of them rabbit holes, you're going to be half
Right.
yeah,
I
it's
think
like
it's
darn if you
mentally
know
exhausting.
it.
Right.
I've probably been studying this stuff for about at least, I bet you, 8 years, and I feel like I'm going backwards instead of forward.
It
I
does
have
feel
to
that way, doesn't it?
now.
Mhm.
Yeah. I
Almost.
probably started learn Mike. Probably started going down this trail about 20 years ago. So yeah, it gets worse.
Well,
Hopefully things
that's
will start
because
to get.
you're trying to make sense out of a system that was designed to not make sense,
Right.
to not
It's
be
finally starting to
understood.
make a
Right.
little bit
So,
of sense, though, and I heard they might be taking it down pretty soon. It's like, man, it sounds like a cool system
Well,
to
they're
me.
not taking the system down. They're replacing it with a version that's worse. It's just
That's why they want the digital, the digital this and that, and that's going to
I,
be more
I
control
I
mechanism.
honestly think the central bank digital currency isn't really a lot worse than what we have now. I mean, if we learn from what happened in Canada a couple years back. When the truckers were up there, the Trudeau shut their bank accounts down.
Right.
So how is that a whole lot different from central bank digital currency? I don't know. Maybe it's just a little bit easier mechanism for them to work with. But I think what they're doing, they're maybe testing the water to see what our reaction will be. Because
Yeah, I think
like I said,
so.
a lot of these things, they're already in place. And by the way, look, be very, apply a lot of scrutiny to the word emerging, because if something is claimed to be emerging, it's probably already been in place for 20 years.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So, like we're the buzzword now is AI. I would be willing to bet that the AIs that they're talking about are probably all, the Pentagon's probably had AI for 20 years now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all under the radar. They just want to, mainstream it now, pretty much.
Mhm.
I think
Or,
that's what it is.
or they have something better and they're giving us their cast off garbage. That's
Well, that could be too.
right.
I have
They've
a
already
theory.
got something that's a lot worse.
I wonder if the government isn't all AI, and we've had AI nannies all this time, and we're
You're Mike.
finally.
You're not that crazy in thinking that, because if geez, Al, as crazy as this is going to sound, I wouldn't be shocked if they're all holed up in Cheyenne Mountain right now and they're just showing us a bunch of CGI images of them.
Yes,
I wouldn't be the
Could be.
least bit
I mean,
shocked by
you
that.
never know.
Yeah, those guys, they bailed out a long time ago because they knew the natives were getting restless.
you're
I,
talking about the cryptocurrency and digital currency. What about those Apple watches? Pretty soon they're just going to shut you down. They don't
Right.
like what you're doing.
I want to share this with everybody here. For the last, I don't know, month or so, I've been watching a lot of material from Sabrina Wallace. I
Ah,
don't know if you've heard.
Name sounds familiar.
Yeah,
yeah, I think
here's the thing. I don't know how legitimate she is, but I kind of attack what she does from an Aristotelian mindset. I mean, I'll entertain what she's saying, even if I don't have enough information to fully accept it. Okay. But she's talking about stuff that since 1996, there have been electronics in place that monitor every single thing we do. The surveillance that the state has on us is a lot more intrusive than you might imagine.
Well, that makes perfect sense because that's when the internet came on in
Hmm.
'94.
Right.
Before that was just Watts lines, and now they've got it to where they can pretty much see everything. Pretty much.
If you get on Rumble, and if you look her up on Rumble, so she goes into wide body area network and
She do
micro. And
non-Baxter 420.
what's that now?
She go by a title called non-Baxter 420.
Yeah, there's okay. That is the gentleman that shows her videos. Is non-vaxxer 420.
But it's a lady. She has dark hair.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
That's been
she's
recommended to
she's
you guys.
boy. I'll tell you what.
She
She
does
lays it all out too.
about the drones with our DNA program in them, where
Hmm.
they can
Right.
access anybody for
And
anything.
she goes into the fact that if you look at CERN for what it is, we're basically being lit up by a great big electromagnet, so that drones overhead can run scans on us. And as I said, there's all kind of technology in place that's never disclosed to you. But their surveillance nets are a lot more intrusive than what we know. So if you haven't looked that up, like I don't, Catherine, I don't know if you've ever watched any of her material, but
I have.
that
Yeah.
okay, I was gonna say that might be something if you're not familiar with her to get familiar with it, because
I asked her to be
she's
on the broadcast actually, but she said
that's funny, because I was actually going to at some point suggest that she'd be on the broadcast, because I honestly think she'd be a great guest to have on.
uh-huh. Yeah.
I've had some information I'd love to share with her about some stuff that, since I watched her videos, I know that this technology has been used on me. So I was going to ask her questions about that. So, oh, well, absolutely. If you can get her on the show, I think it'd be wonderful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ron. I mean, it's probably way more than what we know.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
without a
Here's the
doubt.
thing though. Here's the thing. No matter what freak show anybody exposes, they
Not
don't
Charlie
talk
Freak.
about who who are the these people, and why are we letting them decide anything about our lives? Who died and made them God? You know?
Right. Well, I think they did. But
Well, they think they're
here's
God themselves. See, that's the
right.
thing. See,
And I'll tell you something I would throw into this, a thought is they can come up with a lot of things, but we're intelligent people. And there is, as we learned from Master's Son in the Art of War, there's always a countermeasure. There's a countermeasure for anything that can be imagined. All we have to do is come up with it. I don't care how sophisticated their stuff is. If it's 1,000 years ahead of what we know, we could contrive a countermeasure to it. That I'm absolutely certain.
Yeah, just doesn't mean everything will malfunction. I think it's my aura.
Well, yeah, it's
there
funny.
you go.
Sabrina Wallace goes into the aura a lot. She said, here's what's funny about mainstream science. They know your biofield exists, but they'll tell you, well, that's all new age garbage. It's all you just ignore that. It doesn't exist. I mean, this is something Sabrina Wallace drones on and on again. Your biofeld is just a part of your anatomy,
Uh-huh.
and up
Sure it
until a
is.
certain point mainstream science acknowledged that, and it was only about 2015 when they started acknowledging it again, when they had to, because if you start researching the material on wide body area networks and some of those other things that Sabrina talks about, they can't keep it hidden anymore.
Well, that's interesting. You say that came out in 2015, so we can see why a couple of years later what they did. It's making a lot of sense.
Well, sure. I think if we start looking at this under a looking glass a little closer, we're going to find a lot. Oh boy, yeah, that makes perfect, because you
Yeah,
start
it
looking
opens
at
up a whole lot as to
the
why they're
timelines, right?
acknowledging it now.
Kirlian
Right.
photography, that's proof right there, isn't it? About the energy bodies.
Oh,
Absolutely.
sure. Nobody is ever going to convince me I don't have, call it whatever you want. Nobody's ever going to convince me I don't have a biofield. Certainly not mainstream medicine. They're not. Nobody's going to tell. Oh, that's just new age stuff. Well,
Oh
I'd say
yeah.
okay, but I can just imagine, and I don't go to a doctor. I avoid doctors like the plague.
Yeah.
I would only go to a doctor if I had a broken bone. That's what would lead me. 'Cause chronic illness, right, forget that. I'll go to traditional
And you
Chinese medicine
you
or
wouldn't you wouldn't even have to go to a doctor for a broken bone.
No.
It's
No.
not rocket science to learn how to set bones.
sure.
Yeah, it could be done.
Look, there's probably somebody within your sphere of influence and knows that's not a medical. Well, what is a medical professional? A medical professional simply means they get paid for what they do. It doesn't actually mean they're good at it. That's what the term professional means. It just means they get a paycheck.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're slaves too, because they're ruled by the medical society, which is ruled by somebody else, and yeah,
That's all under the same umbrella.
and all
Oh yeah.
dominated by the criminals running big pharma and big medical. Um,
I mean, here's the thing. If anybody even knows anything about John Rockefeller, that should shake their faith in the medical
Oh boy.
community under the bone.
Yeah.
Holy cow. After John Rockefeller entered the picture, nobody should believe anything they say.
That's pretty much essentially true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. It's almost insanity if you want to be a doctor today and work under their rules. You're kidding yourself.
I don't think I could have made it through med school, Keith. I'm just gonna lie. I think I would probably got about a year in. I'd have dropped out
My dad
because
was really.
I'd been like,
Same
yeah,
here. I would have dropped out too.
I've been like, well, I don't know. The stuff they're trying to sell to me is just a little too crazy. Doesn't make a bit of sense.
Well, and the thing is, they want you to be conditioned to think only a certain way in a very narrow band,
And
and
not
you
ask
go
any
outside of
questions.
that, forget it.
Yeah, don't ask any questions.
right, right. But
I gotta tell you,
there
if I'm
there
sorry,
are
Travis.
alternatives
Same
to
way with
all of
going to
this
college
stuff.
and school. I mean, it's the same thing.
You wouldn't believe the intellectual gymnastics I get when I ask people what firsthand knowledge they have that a virus exists. Well, do you own an electron microscope? Are you trained in electron microscopy? Otherwise, you're just taking somebody's word for it.
I still don't understand that. They've never proven that a virus exists. Does that mean it's like an energetic program,
Well,
basically?
here's the thing. 80% of medicine is
Kind
energy.
of.
Energy makes up 80% of medicine. And you think about the ancient Egyptians, they knew that. I mean, well, that's why they encased themselves in stone. Uh, they were managing energy. If you know anything about history, you look at the Antikythera mechanism. Why would they build something like that unless they were trying to track disease cycles? I mean, otherwise the Antikythera mechanism is just an elaborate toy. You
Well,
know, I
somebody,
know that that's why they built that. They were tracking disease cycles, because disease cycles are tied to solar activity. And that's in Arthur Firstenberg's book. He doesn't, I don't know if he mentions the Antikythera mechanism in it, but that's my theory on why the ancient people developed that technology. They were trying to track disease cycles. But anyway, that's my bit
Yeah,
on
that's
that.
pretty interesting take on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you watch all the History Channel shows on the Antikythera, oh, we don't know why they made this. We have no idea. It's like, well, somebody knows. You just don't want to tell us. You
Well,
know.
sure, they don't want to tell us. No.
Right. The idea is
They're
to
not going
keep
to
you
tell us.
ignorant of those things. But
It's really
God,
hard for them to keep all these elaborate lies going because there's so many
sure.
cracks in the story.
Well, here's the thing. I'm sure that every one of us sitting here knows one or two pathological liars, and eventually, at some point, the lies get too big to manage. Just as Catherine's saying. In other words, well, hey,
Right.
it's like Mark Twain said: you always tell the truth. You don't have to remember what you said. Well, the pathological
Yeah.
liar's got to remember 10,000 elements of the things they've said in the past. Well, what lie did I tell this guy? And pretty soon it becomes impossible to manage.
Yeah, that gets to be, the definition of insanity.
Right. Right.
Well, and yet people are believing those who they know have lied to them in the past. Why would you do that?
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, the very first
maybe
time
quit lying.
somebody tells me a lie,
Yeah, for science, right?
well, I mean, let's say just somebody you know or somebody you're connected to tells you, after that, everything they say comes into scrutiny.
Yeah.
You're like, you know,
Yeah, how can you believe any of it?
right. Yeah, catch somebody in one lie and everything else becomes suspect. I mean, well, hey, if you lie about this, what else will you lie about? It's and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yep.
Stuff's even worse when it's one of your family members.
Sure. Oh yeah, Mike, I get that. I totally get that. But yeah,
I catch people in simple little lies, maybe social lies, and I excuse them. Well, that's only because, and then another one pops up. And after a while, how many excuses can you come up with for their
sure. Even
lies?
with the simple, you're right, exactly. But a
Right.
lot of small lies are just as bad as one big one. You know.
Uh-huh.
If you notice that pattern in behavior, well, I don't think this individual's telling me the truth about anything, you know. So, uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me how I almost think this is one of the reasons the public education system exists. It's to condition you to not see those patterns. I don't know why people aren't watching what's going on in all these Fox News or whatever, or any of these news outlets, and saying, what are, how do these people do this every day? But by the way, I don't watch any mainstream media because I can't handle listening to
I
five
can't
minutes of
No,
listen
it.
it's
to
too
it.
much. I can't. It's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
I get
Long and
overwhelmed the minute it's on.
And yet some people are just addicted to
Oh,
it.
they'll feed on it. I've
they're
seen people
feeding
feed
on
on
it
it.
and they're addicted to it.
Yeah,
It's like you got to you need some help when you're addicted to something like that. You know, you got to get off the bandwagon.
Mm, right.
But I don't know. People have to want to be helped, and
Well, and that's true too.
you can't impose that on them. I think most people who are addicted to anything are going to stay in their addiction. That's the nature of addiction.
Yeah, they get comfortable in it and they want to stay in it. They don't want to get out.
Uh huh. Right.
We certainly got a lot of that going on now.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're dealing with such incredible evil. It goes beyond what would
Right.
seem to be natural, human behavior. It's
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
got to be a supernatural ingredient to it, and I've been looking into that, but that'll probably be another broadcast. Mary Louise, a mutual friend, is very well versed in hidden realm stuff, but I try and stay in the here and now. But what you bring up about how our bodies have been tampered with, and it almost makes me wonder sometimes when we do our 3 notice process. I'm assuming we're serving people. Are we serving people always, or are we serving cyborgs, or what is that?
Well,
Are
you
they
never
still
know.
people?
Well, I
Right.
think there's been an effort made to convert us to that level. I mean, if you think
Right.
about it, if an airplane is flying over your head and spraying you with smart dust, and you're inhaling all these little microprocessors, which are using your body's tissue and material to make biosensors, the
Mhm.
process in converting us to cybernetic organisms already started. It started with the chemtrail program, and there is no escaping it. I mean, if unless you can avoid breathing. So
Well,
this
I
is
think our bodies are designed to um, flush out a certain level of
I'm
toxins.
sure we can handle some
sure,
of it.
sure. Well, here's the thing too. If you look at it from just basic rational analysis, if they have to keep constantly doing this, our bodies must be flushing some of it out.
Well, yeah, they
Otherwise,
have
they
to.
Yes.
otherwise they wouldn't have to. In other words, they could have just made one pass over us and it would have been done. But
Uh
you
huh.
notice that those planes never
In
stop.
fact, this past Monday they were really upping the all those chemtrails.
I mean, I'm
But
going to tell you just from my memory, 20 years ago, I can remember driving to work and the sky looked like a spider web. I mean, there was a time
uh
way
huh.
back then.
That's what it looked like on Monday.
Right, right.
You know.
So here's the thing: if the necessity exists for them to do this constantly, yeah, our bodies must be getting rid of it some way. And I half think that was what was behind the you know what, the pokey. They wanted to try
Right.
to drive it deeper into our bodies and get it to last a little longer, get the effects to last. I think that was a big part of that program. So, you
Yeah,
know,
with their rationale, that's probably true. They're thinking that they can, get a lock hold on it and continue on and really get a grip on it.
right. And to put it upon us under the pretext of some kind of an emergency. So now you have fear and oh God, I got to do this, or this virus that no one has ever really seen firsthand is going to kill me. Uh,
Yeah.
rational analysis just does not exist. I hate to
No,
say it.
I
no.
think those shots killed both my parents because I think they slipped my mom some of them shots when she said she didn't want them, but
Oh, well, it's been Mike. It's been going on a long time. I mean, probably since
Oh
we were
yeah.
children. It's been, like I said, if the words emerging are used, this stuff's been in place for years. I think we can all pretty much we can believe that.
I wanted to cover, some of the other stuff that's in the title of the broadcast tonight that are involved in land grabs. as we've discussed, they use the tax pretext. They use the mortgage pretext, which has been rebutted in their own system. All of it has. Then there's the predatory probate, and that gets into where somehow you're getting into the corporate psychiatry system there too, because somehow, and I don't find any biblical precedent for any of this. People in the Bible didn't become incompetent, it seems like. I guess they would become demon possessed, maybe, but they wouldn't. There was, I don't find any discussion of them becoming incompetent, particularly when it, today it's sort of like, oh yeah, you get to be a certain age, and it's presumed that after that age you're going to be incompetent, and the corporate state's going to have to take care of you, and they're going to
Well, that
have to.
reminds me, just like when you hit 65,
Uh huh.
expect you better get on Medicare, right?
Uh huh.
Got to
But
do
you
it,
can opt out of it. You can opt out of it.
Most people
right?
don't get to the
Right.
competent part, though, do they? Don't you have to be like age of majority? And isn't that kind of the boat where most of us are in? Is being
Mhm.
considered like minors, like incompetent?
Well, yeah, I think that's the basis of pretty much the entire legal system. They
Yeah.
see us as something. I mean, I'm sure Catherine would tell this. If you go to court with an attorney, that the assumption is made that you're incompetent. Otherwise, why would the attorney need to be there with you?
Right.
You have no knowledge of matters of law, so you had to hire a professional to do that. So, like I said, I think the whole system is built on the premise that we don't know anything.
That's pretty
And in
much the way I see
some
it.
level, there's some truth to it. A lot of people are not knowledgeable and certainly not knowledgeable in law, but I mean, there's a lot of literacy in everything.
Has anybody
Uh,
brought up the surveyors with the land and stuff like that?
We've not covered that, no.
Because I came across some information that said one of the reasons why how they do the taxing is they changed the method of surveying, which I found at least seven or nine methods. And the one that they referred to it as imaginary lines. It's kind of like, from what I understood, it's almost like they took the actual coordinates of the Earth and shifted them all to one direction to where the actual land coordinates would be out in the water.
Well,
I
that could
got,
be
I got,
another assumption on their end, and also, whatever assessments that they want to make.
well, they
yeah,
refer to your land by a corporate code number, parcel
Yes,
number this and
Right. I mean, it's
section
all
number.
codes anyway.
Whereas the Bible always referred to land by metes and bounds
that's what I
descriptions.
was just going to ask you next. That was my next question.
Yeah.
That's what I sort of narrowed it down to. It seemed like meets and bounds was the actual physical location of the stuff that they originally
Right.
went by. That they switched everything over,
Yeah, the meets and bounds, right?
and once you make your own game, then everybody has to play by your rules. Is that
well, when you think about it, Mike, what motivates any systemic change? It's generally not a good reason. I mean, if you think about it, at one time we were all on the Julian calendar, and now we are not. We're on the Gregorian calendar. And you think about the confusion that caused when that happened. In fact, I think there were wars fought over
True. I
that.
mean, right.
So
I
when you
tried.
make a large scale systemic change, I'm going to assume that it's to create confusion.
Now, isn't it
Well,
2028 is when they're going to go to, daylight saving time is going to come to an end? Something like
I
that?
I gotta tell you, Keith, I don't know that that I don't see that happening because it seems to me like that disrupts things and they like disruption. I
Right.
don't I don't I don't see daylight savings time ever. I could be wrong though. I mean, but
Or at
I
least
don't
that's
see
what
them
they
ever.
proclaimed, and I think they've
Right,
already, made some on the mainstream as well.
right.
But who knows,
It's right hard to say. Really is.
yeah, if we reacted to everything, every wild claim that they threw out there, we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and you're not going to be able to do this, and you're going to have to do that, we'd never get anything done. I mean,
Well, I think that'd
who
create a
are these
neurotic.
people?
That'd be a neurotic. That's creating a neurotic state.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they want to try to do.
That's a induced psychoneurosis. Oh God, what are they going to do to us next? We're sitting here like Pavlov's dog, waiting to be swatted on the nose with a newspaper. I think if I was Pavlov's dog, I think I just would have found somebody else's house to hang out at. But that's just me. You know, but
They
that's
want to
funny.
make
People,
it so complicated, and
right?
so. Well, I mean, we all know that if they have more knowledge, that they've created themselves a body of information that others don't have. That's a way of giving them power. Everybody knows that who's ever dealt with a building contractor. If they know more about carpentry than I am, they're going to have an edge over me. They know more about being an electrician than I do, they're going to have an edge. They're going to have power over me. You know.
Well,
Uh,
there's something I want to share with everybody. I used to work for a custom home builder many, many years ago. And if you think about it, every $100 you spend on a house, $35 of that is what goes to the general contractor. And all that guy's doing, he knows something you don't, and he's scheduling the contractors to show to your house.
Absolutely.
So back a few years ago, if you bought $100,000 house, it could have been a $65,000 house if that house were prefabricated. You assembled it yourself, didn't have to schedule any of those things. The house might have been structurally autonomous or systemically autonomous, where it didn't need to be hooked up to utilities.
Yeah.
You take out all the complexity of the equation, and all of a sudden you got a really cheap house.
In fact,
So
really, when you come down to it, when a builder comes and develops a whole neighborhood, I mean, that's all built into the contractors are all built into that price of that house for sure.
no, I mean
yeah.
that particular job I had was very eye opening. And I thought to myself, wow, it's no wonder nobody can afford a house because
Yeah, I'll bet.
there's all this fraud, waste, and abuse built into it. Um, then you take into consideration you're going to pay for that house 3 times. So take all that wasted money
Mhm.
times three. That's
Oh, at
what it's going to
least.
cost you. And your time in the context of labor you expend to service that loan is not insignificant. That's years out of your life. That's units of energy. So this is the way the system consumes our energy, you know, and it's
Right. It's
not
pulling us down while we have to
right,
attend to that.
right.
And it's a lot of energy that we have to put out.
See, that's something, I always said I tried, design. I wanted to design houses that eliminate a lot of those things. How can we eliminate a lot of the waste so that people live a little bit better lives so they're not spending all their energy trying to service something that never should have existed? I got to tell you, I don't know if any of you guys, either you guys probably ever heard of Gordon Murray. He is a car designer, and
I
he
was
had he
just
had
going
he
to ask
had
you
the
that.
he had the idea. Hey, I got an idea. We'll put the company showrooms right off of the factory floor. So we're not spending all this money shipping cars across the country to a dealership. And well, gosh, that significantly reduces the cost of the car. And now when you're getting that loan, car loans are probably 10 years or more now. So that
And
all
now,
this
of
plays.
course, the electric car, they want to really promote it. Oh,
Well,
gosh.
it's a horrible idea. And I
Yeah,
and I'll tell you why that is, just from an engineering standpoint. If you look at an electric car, um, a battery is really horrible. No matter how good it is, it's really horrible at storing energy. We'd be better served to have the system that nobody has, called a series hybrid, which is what all the freight trains use. From an engineering perspective, a freight train is a 500 mile per gallon car, because if you look at the amount of weight it moves for the amount of energy expended,
Sure.
it's literally that efficient. If a car were as efficient and it moved that much weight with that expenditure of fuel, that's the kind of fuel economy you get. So you ask yourself if these engineers know how to build these things. And I got to tell you, if you went to these companies, there are probably engineers working for these companies that considered all these things and they just simply were not allowed to implement those changes.
Oh, I'm sure they weren't.
Oh, they went to the boss and said, "Hey, look, I got this wonderful idea to make this car really efficient." They said, "Well, too bad. Get to where we're going to bring out an EV next month, and it's a rolling incendiary grenade, but that's what we're going to use instead of your idea." So, you know, things like
Well,
that. I apologize to Catherine. I didn't mean to go off on that big of a segue, but I was on a roll there.
well, yeah, I think the last, I don't know, episodes 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 were kind of devoted to how do, we can continue to have, you know, some of the goods and services that we are used to um, without being enslaved to some corporation. Um, but I wanted to, you know, just point out as to the land grabs because that's kind of an existential threat, really, for most people. Um, Most people are probably not going to listen to anything any of us say. And they want to be enslaved. They want someone else to do their thinking for them if they're
Right.
going to go down the wrong path. I don't think that any of our ideas are going to take off in a big way. And that's just the way it is. I think we have to think in terms of separating ourselves, like the Amish do. Um,
That's going to,
but
I agree. That's going to become a necessity. I
Yeah. I
can't,
mean,
I'm finding people aren't really receptive to anything. And
They
basically it's because
attack
people
you.
are
You try
consumed.
to help them, and
the
they
only thing you
attack.
could do is one person at a time. If you get one more person, maybe that's great. But yeah, we'll keep doing what we're doing.
Sure. And I wanted to tell Catherine, you were talking about land grabs. I'm fairly convinced East Palestine, there's some kind
That
of land grab going on with that
I live right
because
yeah,
by
it's
there. I
No
the,
question.
say they're probably getting ready to do a land grab down here. I'm hoping they're not going to grab my land, but
well, here's the thing, when we find some cobalt or something under it or some valuable commodity, yeah, I mean, that's what you're looking at. I think that's the
but
case with
look
these
at
kind.
how that they justify that. It's their Fifth Amendment to their Constitution, and remember, a lot of the things that they do are based on the the idea they're not bound by their Constitution. And in 1947, they transferred all offices to the corporate United Nations. Okay, so every time we bring up their Constitution, that's just they just think that's nonsense, and that's why. But uh, as far as the opportunities that we have to just deal with our issues ourselves outside of their system and avoid their problems, I think we have enough people that we could you know protect one another and stay separate. I'm looking at the predatory probate, for example, like the Roger Hilligus case that we talked about on prior broadcasts. Um, what makes that what makes that scam so destructive is that the people who are being subjected uh, to it are playing in their fake uh, corporate tribunals they call courts. If they weren't doing that, if they were going according to the Bible's rules about descent and distribution, or early common law rules about descent and distribution, it's pretty much consistent with uh, what the Bible had to say. Now there were some conflicts in the Bible too, as to who was going to get. Generally it would be the firstborn male would get, I don't know, whatever the patriarch decided. and there were games that got played with that, and we see some of those repercussions in the land that was Mesopotamia now. Sin has a way of reverberating even through the centuries. But that's why I keep wanting to get back to the solution, and which will only be for a few people. Uh, I mean, everyone's called, but few will answer the call. Um, a few people can decide, well, okay, here's a situation where you've got, a couple and they're declining or whatever they're doing, and they want their property to go a certain way, and then a group of people who are free, who formed a common law godly court, will simply be rubber stamping a, uh, a what has already been agreed to with the three notice process. Um, Generally speaking, if you go into their fake tribunals, they're not going to do they're not going to do anything according to God's law. However, if you serve them with notices, God's law says this, God's law says that, and that's the way it should be done, they will not dispute you ever. And so, and you tell them, and then by not disputing what we say, you have agreed that's how we're going to resolve this conflict between us. So, you do that 3 times, and you're consistent with God's law, Matthew 18:15 through 17, and you're consistent with man's law according to the UCC. So, sure, they may decide that they're just going to be criminals and they're going to just do whatever they're going to do, but they're at least going to have to violate a valid court order to do that. And that's all in the world we can do. And I'm hoping that we will have, the strong arm of God behind us if we stay the course and do that.
I think that's inevitable.
But if not, we're being tested, and I intend to stay with the current plan. Now I'm all over the place here, but I had been thinking recently that we can do this biblically as far as having a justice system that's outside of the current predatory, fake so-called justice system. That maybe we're making it too difficult. I had wanted to have 12 people on our court. We have 9. I also wanted to have a common law grand jury because these people that are doing what they're doing to us should be prosecuted. However, I'm starting to think maybe that's unnecessarily complicated and not necessary in order to fulfill, Bible guidelines. Some of the early courts, in Exodus it was just Moses, or it was just a group of 10 actually, not 12. And then
Can't you just have a court just like you and God, like a covenant or a trust, a private trust or something?
I don't do trust. Trusts are of Satan. No. We don't need a trust. Now, we don't need to call ourselves anything.
Isn't there like one that exists that's actually works?
Well, I want to throw this in there. What dictates that it has to be 10 or 12? Is that a legalism of some kind? I mean, how did that get established? That there were this grand jury had to be 12 people. Why couldn't it be 10? Why couldn't it be 9? What's the
Right.
I wanted it to be historically accurate according to Magna Carta because it has greater um, name recognition, if you will. You know,
Okay. Well, that's logical.
900 years of jurisprudence. However, that said, you know, the original grand juries were they were all over the place. Some of them were 25, some of them were 35 um, people. And then I started asking myself, why do we need a grand jury at all if we've already established the facts, which the Matthew 18:15 through 17 three-notice process does. It establishes the facts in God's world and in their world. It establishes the facts. Once you've established the facts by preponderance or beyond a reasonable doubt, then why do you need an investigative body at all? Now, I thought, well, maybe we did need that because some of these people, these criminals, are still, they might still be hanging on to the rights they have under their Fifth Amendment to have a grand jury indictment or presentment. But if they've already agreed, these are the facts, if they've already agreed that they're not entitled to such a thing, then why would we go to the effort to create a grand jury? A grand jury could serve a function if the perpetrators of a certain criminal act were unknown. A grand jury can certainly perform an investigative function. But if there's an accused man or woman and they've already agreed through the three-notice process that, yeah, I did those things, what's the point of a grand jury? You know, there's no point in establishing probable cause. You've already done that with the three-notice process.
So you
So
may be onto something. You know.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking more and more, and it simplifies things.
Yeah.
If you look at Exodus 18, that they were speaking of a 10 man group, groups of tens and 50s and hundreds. And I'm wondering, where did the 12 come in? I mean, I know about the 12 apostles and the 12 sons of Jacob, and it comes up a lot. But
Or what about an even number? You know, an even number of members.
well, 10 would be an even number.
Right.
Of course, the thing is, the way we're doing it at OCCR is we're never taking testimony and listening to disputed facts. By the time the matter gets to us, it's already been agreed to because they never dispute what the claimant says in their notices, although given full opportunity to do so. So,
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting part right there.
What I understand, they can't really dispute anything. They're doing everything wrong, from what I've been gathering.
so
What do people do for an ID or something? Because you almost can't even exist
why do
in
you need an
society.
ID? Who says you need an ID?
Well, like you can't hardly do anything in society without it. Like I
Well,
was
Right.
yeah,
Well,
if
there's
you want to be part of the cabal, yes, you
well.
need all kinds of stuff. You need to
Here's
pay
Right.
your
here's a
taxes.
simple example. I had something that I bought for my mom for her vehicle from AutoZone. I wanted to take it back, and it was after 90 days. They wouldn't even accept it back without an ID. Like, not even give me a merchandise credit.
Oh, it's awful. It's
Oh, they wouldn't
awful.
even give you an in-store credit?
Yeah, it could because it was over 90 days.
Uh-huh.
And I talked to State Farm and asked them like if they would cover somebody with a passport because I thought like a passport was the ticket, and they said they will not cover you with insurance.
well, here's the thing, Mike. I don't know how anybody feel about this, but if you present someone with an ID, that identification card does not belong to you and does not have your name on it. I've told, I've actually told people, well, in a very factual sense, I've never had a driver's license because it doesn't belong to me and it doesn't have my name on it. You're agreeing to be the name of the legal pseudonym on the card. The only thing I have on my person that would make it crystal clear that it's me is one of my fingerprints. That's why you put them on certain, that's your seal. That's the seal that you were granted by your creator. That's what you
Right.
could use to identify yourself. Using a state generated document, to tell you the truth, you're not even identifying yourself. You are simply to agreeing to be a name that they are using or to play the role of that name. So I always thought that was, ever since I learned about it, that was kind of hokey to begin with. Okay, I'm not identifying myself. I'm agreeing to be an actor in their movie, pretty much,
Yeah.
in their stage show.
Pretty
But
much,
to be
right?
willing to take a stand in that way, you have to give up the the pleasures of the Satanist system.
Sure. Well, the thing I always wondered is, what if I were on trial? They've got you in the orange suit and you can't escape. If I
I've
was on
been
trial, I'd simply
I've
say,
been
"Hey, I'm not even a defendant in this case because I'm not the entity that's on trial, nor have I agreed to
That's
be it." I
true
wouldn't
too,
answer
right?
any of their questions.
Well, what you have to do before it would, if you sense that some accusation is going to come out, you do your three notice processing. Then you establish what the facts are, which include, you know, their unlawful acts and your innocence. That there is no evidence that this or this or this. Usually, they're charging people with statutory or corporate policy infractions, not common law crimes. They, they've abandoned the idea of charging people with common law crimes. That that's not what they do, and they have no authority to do that, and they recognize they have no authority to do that. All they have are offenses.
I would make the argument that they don't even have the right to say my name because they've proven that with the fictitious name that they've created, they have to trick me into assuming that role. Apparently, they have no right to even say my name in that court. That's how limited their rights are. They don't even have the right to
Technically,
name
you're
me.
right.
I don't know what they can do in their so-called court. They can probably roast children on a spit in their court,
Well, sure, they can
which
get
is
away
Yeah,
with
yeah,
whatever.
all.
They're not they're
That's
right.
not
not our
operating in law.
concern. Our concern is not to fix them.
I heard they still have restaurants where they serve humans. It's like right openly.
Oh, I know.
You order chicken fingers or fingers, fried fingers, just what you get. And
Well,
this is
that
like in
I
New
got to be
York.
honest, Mike. I think of that, but I don't like to go into those weeds. That's
I
you
know.
know, it's that's gonna don't disagree with you, but yeah,
Yeah, I haven't witnessed it myself, but Jared, I don't know if you've heard of Jared Rand. He was mentioning it. He seems pretty credible. I mean, I've been listening to him for years, and he
Who is
seems
it?
pretty. Jared Rand.
Never heard of him.
I'm not familiar with the name, Mike. Maybe I'll look him up.
I've not heard that either.
Yeah, he does a meditation every day at 3 o'clock, and he also does a time for change call and a health call on Friday. And he
Okay.
brings a lot of like new information that you don't hear anywhere else. I mean, it's pretty out there for most people. They would. I don't think anybody's ever listened to it that I've mentioned it to. Not
I
one
say,
person. It's like for a certain amount of people, and I think that's it. Like he talks about like replicators and things like that, and when
well, I
we
got to
talk,
tell you, Mike. I think people find the information they need when they're ready for it, when the time is when it's supposed to happen. Like, I mean, there was a time when I was supposed to start interacting with Catherine and you. I mean, things happen according to a plan and in the time that they're supposed to happen. That's kind of maybe that's why no one's heard of your boy yet. His message, there's the plan is for the message to come out at a certain time, and that's when it'll happen.
I hope I don't find out he's a fraud because I'd be really crushed. I mean,
Well,
he just gives you that like I don't know. You can almost feel it in your heart that it's like It just resonates good with.
Well, I got to tell you, the people that like I'm not gonna say or name any names, but there are people who have infiltrated what we do, and they're operating in a co-intel pro capacity. A lot of what they're doing is infusing a lot of what they say with the truth. So there's truth in what they're saying,
Yeah, that's
but
you're right, Ron.
what they're going to do is in the process of administering that truth, they're going to throw a little
Some
off
trash
ramp
in
off
there.
the interstate. We're gonna send before you get to the truth. We're gonna get you off the interstate in this little town here,
That's
so you don't make it to your destination.
that's why I was
That's
asking about Brandon Williams because I really like
that's
him.
you got right now we have to be really vigilant, to have our eyes open because there's a lot of co-intel pro out there. There's a lot of people who will take you
Yep.
by the hand and they'll get you close to the truth. They'll get you 80 or 90% there, and then they're going to
Right.
throw you off the interstate. And
Got
you're
to
going
be
to be
super vigilant.
right. Got to keep our
Then they
eyes
lead
open.
you right back into the cabal.
Right. Exactly, Catherine. That's
Sure,
the
we'll
point I'm
lead you.
trying
We'll
to
take
make
your
here.
hand. We're going to take you right here
Mhm.
You
and
got
make you
Pete
think
I
that
got
you're
to
Rogers.
tell
getting.
you, that's a feeling I got about David straight right off the bat. He was making perfect sense. This guy was saying, "Oh, okay, this guy knows what he's talking
Mhm.
about," and then he started promoting Donald Trump. I thought, well,
Yeah.
you're just leading us right
Yep.
back into
Yep.
the
Everybody
into the
leading
system.
right back to the same place.
Hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, like I
Let
said,
me
Mike,
just hit these last points.
didn't mean to interrupt
About
you. Sorry,
landgrabs.
Catherine.
No problem. You mentioned East Palestine, so I'll mention it. Originally, remember back, y'all are probably too young to remember this. Back with Love Canal, which is a neighborhood in
In
Niagara
New York.
Falls, New York.
Or,
Um,
Hmm. I know
I
about
checked
that.
on it. There are a lot of things going on with Love Canal besides the
Oh,
noise
the
from
Love
the.
Canal. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a chemical spill, and of course, one of these catastrophe contaminated land cases always involve. Oh, let's get the federal so-called government involved, and that was when they started, and I don't think it ever quit. They started Superfund. Remember
Oh,
Superfund?
I know all about Superfund, Catherine. Know all
Okay.
about it.
Oh.
Yep.
Well, what funds Superfund? Why has it spawned other contaminated sites where the land can then be purchased at fire sale prices? Who benefits?
Well, here's the
Not the
thing.
polluter.
Right.
It's the taxpayer that pays for Superfund.
Well,
And that
there's the
reminds me of
mechanism. We dump some chemicals somewhere. The taxpayer pays for it, and then whenever we buy the land and develop it and whatever, we keep all the profit, and we've stuck someone else with the expense. That's been Superfund's game from day one. Well, here's the thing: I want to make more money on my land asset, my land grab here. So, gosh, I don't want to pay for this cleanup. Someone else needs to pay for it. So basically, they just made their little business more profitable. Transfer
Right.
your.
just like they want to rebuild that bridge down there in Baltimore now.
Oh gosh, yeah. Who
Yeah.
who knows what's involved with that?
Right. Yeah, really.
I was going to
Yeah,
mention
but
you talk about the electric cars and that 90% of our bridges are unsafe. Those electric cars are heavy.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
yeah. Now, as
but
far as East
Yeah, they're cumbersome.
Palestine,
They're bulky.
um, of course, remember Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Um,
whatever his name is, nobody, I think
Booty
anybody
juice.
knows what his
he
name is.
said that
Booty
Yeah.
juice, I think that's what Biden called him one time.
what the country, in other words, the federal cabal, owes East Palestine. Wait a minute, the cabal didn't send that that ship into that bridge, or didn't create that land spill. They didn't. Did they make? Did the federal cabal decide to explode all those chemicals? Maybe they did. But they seem to just suddenly jump in. We're going to take care of this. Why would they be taking care of it rather than the people who caused it? Um,
Because they were too quick to say, "Oh well, we're gonna pay for it and worry
uh,
about everything else later."
They have a controlled
Which
burn.
is they're all
well, they do
part of
that
the
every
business
time, so it's
transaction.
not a surprise.
A controlled burn.
Yeah, controlled burn, right? Mm.
But what Pete Buttigieg says is that uh, this will be a blessing in disguise. Basically, this will be a way of making railroads safer. He encouraged Congress to pass a package of reforms, and I bet who's going to pay for those, and it won't be the perpetrators or the polluters. So they're going to pass this package of reforms, which of course will have to be funded after the derailment that would set tough standards for inspections. In other words, nobody who is negligent in causing harm is going to be affected by this. It's just a matter of enacting tougher standards, and that can only happen from the corporate cabal, right?
Yeah, and that's
Outside
well,
detectors while
Yeah,
giving
well,
authorities power
right.
to impose much bigger fines.
what should be a flashing neon sign that the whole thing was planned. With
Yeah,
that legislation probably existed 2 or 3 years before the incident
probably.
happened, and now we have the rationale to pass it. Oh, hey, look, an accident. Isn't
Oh
that
yeah, it was an
unfortunate?
accident, so we got to pass this.
It was quite a
We're
few.
gonna add it to the package bill that we're gonna pass next time.
So the people, the lawyers, are waiting for the people of East Palestine to say yay or nay as to whether they're going to get bought off. I think it was like a $600 million package, and Buttigieg says if we get this right, their community will be known not only for the derailment that upended everyday life there, but for the life-saving reforms that came next. Everybody wins, right?
We. Yeah, yeah, we've heard this before. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's what they
But
do. They'll the ones that really were affected by it, they'll designate a little money over here, make it look good that we're taking care of the problem, and
well, the thing is, the money that they're being given won't even come close to what
no,
people operate under the assumption that money can just automatically solve problems, and there's a lot
right,
of loss that you incur in your life that money won't address. There are intangible things like, lost time.
sure, you can throw money at anything, and if you
Right,
don't manage
what's the
to,
formula?
yeah, right.
Oh, hey, look, I lost half of the capacity of my lungs and just got my life shortened by 5 years. But so what good is that money?
I
So
wonder what
yeah.
would happen though if there was a common law judgment against the guy who decided he was going to explode those chemicals.
Yeah, a little bit of liability attached to that, I'd say. So
I'm not talking.
yeah.
I'm talking beyond liability. I'm talking about criminal sanctions. You know,
Mm.
what if there? I mean,
That might change it a little bit, I think.
and what if those criminal sanctions? What if there were people who would organize to? I mean, anybody. The judgment could indicate that anybody can enforce this judgment, and we might have a way of enforcing criminal judgments. You know, and
Lead
so
poisoning.
I think we ought to think in terms of what we can do to enforce that. Ejectment actions again to get control of the county jails back to the people. Um, Firing squads can always be organized on an ad hoc basis, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, what does the Bible?
that's what it's
Well,
coming
this is
to. That's what it's
what does
coming
Old
to.
Testament say about murderers?
This is only after full due process, which is
Right.
built into the three notice process. If they choose to not avail themselves of their due process opportunities, well, that's on them. So I'm
Yeah.
just putting this out there because with all the history we've got, nobody ever thinks about just taking the bull by the horns and doing it themselves. It's always got to be the idea from the beginning of the country has always been, we need good representatives. God forbid we should actually do it ourselves. So.
Yeah. What if we took our own problems and resolved them ourselves? That would be a very good point. And I got to tell you, I think it's a missed opportunity with a lot of people. Well, hey, here's the opportunity for us to solve it.
All right.
Or will we take it?
Instead of, well, we're going to go to the voting box and we're going to take care of it. It's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah.
No,
Can't go to the voting box. Won't work.
Designed to fail.
Designed to fail.
We
right.
can vote for something designed to fail in this manner, or we can vote for something that is designed to fail in that manner. Those are our choices.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know Catherine and I have discussed fail by design methodology in several conversations we've had in the past. Yeah, there's several ways to design failure into things. And I'm sure they have all of them figured out.
Oh yeah.
They can just put a nice, interesting spin on whatever approach.
Oh yeah, they can put a spin on it and make it the way they want it to go,
or make it look good,
or make it look good.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I know, Kath, we've discussed that good bit. Fail by design.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask Frank to close us out. He hasn't been back on, has he?
I think we can just simply log off
he's got to preserve it for posting on YouTube.
Okay.
But while we're waiting for him, I just sent him a message. And I could. Well, I don't have his phone number.
All right, Frank's muted, and his camera's off.
Well, I've got his phone number somewhere here. Let's see.
Did you see that link I put in last week's comments on YouTube?
Oh, there you
are. Hey, Catherine.
He's on now.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I just got your email.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks, Frank. Okay, so, yeah, I think we're going to sign off for this broadcast on the land grabs. And until next time, I've got some other ideas to run past people. Feel free to contact me, WLJAradio@AOL.com, or call me, 614-633-0215, about any show ideas that you have. I have a few of my own. We're not out of ideas yet. But as we've said before, we're solution-oriented. There's plenty of problems. There's plenty of ways we can play Ain't It Awful, but our focus is going to be on solutions. So
it's a good strategy.
Next time, that'll be in 2 weeks from now, today being the 11th. So the 25th, we'll be back at the same time, 9 p.m. Eastern. Thanks, everybody who's on the call and everybody at home listening. And keep an eye out for the posting on YouTube, which Frank's going to take care of. Thank you, Frank.
No worries. My pleasure.
I think he's already left the call.
No, he just answered you.
Yeah, he just.
Okay. All right. Well. Well, I'm going to leave then, and thanks everybody, and
Okay.
we'll be back again in 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, good night, everyone.
God bless.
Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep.